Dealer Tech Tuesdays is brought to you by VTech Dealer IT, guaranteeing your dealership premier reliability, stability, and customer support. Transform your Tuesdays into a powerhouse of growth. Contact us at www.vtechdealerit.com. Brian Kramer.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Dude, I've been wanting to do this podcast for a long time, man. You're one of the smartest dudes in the car business. I think one of the most innovative. I've been wanting to have this conversation because I think you and I think in a similar fashion as far as data, as far as process, as far as I think ecosystem is really the right word, or like in systems. So
I would agree. And I think that the way to actually move more smoothly and be able to freestyle more in dealerships is actually you have to have systems in place to be able to free you up to be able to do those the things that everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
The fun stuff.
So I usually start with everybody about how do they get into the car business. So how was that journey for you?
Well, I started off as a detailer washing cars at an Oldsmobile dealership, and then transitioned into selling cars there, and couldn't handle that level of freedom when I first got in there. So I got let go, probably 6 months in. After having a few good months, I got comfortable. I went over to an Infinity store where I lucked out. And they said, if you want the job, you got to sell that customer out there. It was a fresh up. And it was either do it or don't. And luckily I did. And then, everybody else all the leadership got fired. So nobody knew how to use a computer. So I ended up in F&I because everybody was terrified of it. They're like, hey, do you know how to use one of these things? It's not because I knew how to sell F&I products. It's because I knew how to use a computer because I had a Commodore 64. Dating myself.
Jeez. Yeah. So you naturally had an ability of, just engaging with customers and then knowing technology. I think that's a lethal combination in the car business, especially in the last, 30 years, right?
Yeah. And in my age, I'm Gen X, but at the bottom end of it, almost a millennial, there's an age advantage that I had because everybody I worked with was 20 years older than me. So whenever Auto-by-Tel came out and internet leads and anything like that, trying to map things out. And actually, ironically, when we went paperless at Germain Toyota, 25 years later, the interesting thing is that the reason I was able to do that is because I knew all the hard prompts and the cheat codes, if you will, in CDK, in Reynolds and Reynolds, in order to bypass all the things that is just tribal knowledge that even the support team didn't know how to do from way back when, because you had to do it all the manual overrides.
Yeah. Yeah, that institutional knowledge gives people, like, just, one of the things that we see as IT guys, like IT systems guys, is like you start collecting people that know how to do weird things in CDK or Reynolds or, I call them like the elves behind the, behind the system that are making the levers happen. And those guys know how to do that stuff. So that institutional knowledge of doing it, it's like, new CDK reps that have been around for 10 years have no idea. They don't even know that you can actually do that, like that world exists, because it's so layered and there's so much depth to the system. So it's really interesting that just by being around, having that institutional knowledge, it just happenstance created a perfect storm where you could create a paperless process in a very innovative way.
And a lot of luck, just timing of how things unfolded. There was one point where I was trying to, because there's always all these fields, and you're like, well, it says it should do that. And then everybody at support goes, I don't know why that field is there. And dealer cash and incentives is one of them. If you go into CDK, into the G screen and hit line 6, it's for incentives, rebates. You can automate that for commission. So almost every dealership I've ever worked at, it's manual in every single deal. And I saw it at AutoNation had been automated, but nobody knew how it happened. And they go, we can't share, AutoNation's data. And I said, can you just tell me how to do it? No, we don't see how it can be done. And then lo and behold, somebody was coming in from CDK checking on my controller. He goes, hey, is there anything I can help you out with? And I'm in the conference room. And I said, yeah, if you can help me fix this puzzle piece. I've been trying to figure this out for like years. And he goes, oh, and he hit a couple codes that opened up a Super Mario Brothers type window, like going underground.
A parallel dimension, yeah.
And he goes, I go, I've opened up, I don't know how many different tickets, and how do you know how to do that? He goes, unless you were here at the beginning, you wouldn't. Because I'm retiring next week, so I'm probably the last person that knows that.
Wow.
So when other dealers can't go 100% paperless, those are the reasons why. is either they don't have access to those fields, or they don't know that one person with the enterprise knowledge, and they've all retired, and then it wasn't documented anywhere.
Yeah, that's a real problem. You know, like, so, you know, I was in the military, right? I worked on B-52 bombers. There were 58 and 60 models. So you're like, can we talk to the engineer that designed these? Like, he's been dead for 25 years. You know, like, there's nobody, you know, nobody knows these very detailed questions. There's a guy that we deal with, Dave Davis, that you probably heard the name of the name in the business, and he's a guy that comes in and just makes everything smoother. I don't know what he does. He has super CDK access, and he just makes the puzzles move, and he's like, just add Dave, and these buy cells will go 10 times, 10 times better. It's wild.
That's an episode in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, I know that, I know that you've been extraordinarily innovative in your journey of coming in, of being in the car business. Where does that come from? I mean, is it a desire of curiosity, because it seems like that's where it originates from, but also the implementation and just like this perfect storm of having a high performer that puts all these pieces together? Well, how's that process for you?
Well, that's a good question. I'm obsessed with eliminating redundancy and the same things that happen over and over and over again. So like back in 02, 03, everybody was saying that Market Scan or M-Pencil, the old touchscreen lease calculator, that you could push that into the DMS. So kept on tinkering with that, and I think most people aren't willing to stay up till midnight, toying around with that. But I know that if you add a little bit of friction at the beginning, and you do figure that out, that the throughput and the velocity, that's where the speed comes from. All those little paper cuts when you need to, one of the first things that I learned when I was selling, 12 to 15 cars a month at an Infinity store, my GSM said, "Hey, you got to get organized." And I go, "Well, I am organized." He goes, "No, you need to start with the end in mind. Start your month out. How many cars you want to sell? You want to sell 20? You should have 20 deal jackets with every document you need, and assume that everyone's going to have a trade. You need the 2 key rings, the things to stock in the trades, the not for sale or the not for sale stickers. Every single thing that everybody runs around scrambling like chickens with their head cut off. It should be like Kaizen. Everything is within arm's reach. You don't have to think about it. You just do, just like a standard operating procedure.
Yep.
But for everything. But the innovation, I used to scoff at a lot of things, actually. And I used to, hey, I got to stay focused. I'm not worrying about that noise or that noise, and you guys can go down that rabbit hole. I'm not doing it. And then it was in 2011. Grant Cardone and I have known each other for a long time from like that Oldsmobile store.
Okay.
In, training.
Out of the trunk,
Exactly. Yeah, door to door. And, way back when nobody would listen to him, he was trying to talk about buying cars off the service drive, which now we've come full circle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in 2011, he stopped by and saw me at Lexus Clearwater, and had him come in and talk to the dealership. Nobody knew who he was or ever heard of him. And he said, I think I'm gonna get big on social media. And in 11, I'm like looking at it like I guess I looked at TikTok 2 years ago, right? And I'm like, that's for little kids. What are you going to do on social media? He goes, I'm going to build a real estate empire. And I'm like, Grant, you talk about some crazy stuff. And at this point, he was like retired. Like he sold his training company. He was, a couple of years older than I am now. And he goes, I'm going to crowdsource this real estate thing. I'm going to open up, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar deal. You should come on with me. And I'm like, no, I'm on a track here. I'm working at AutoNation. I'm going to be a market president. I appreciate it. But I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that's some of the craziest stuff I've ever heard him say. And he says some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And I look at him now, and he walked me through exactly how he was going to do it. And that's exactly what his playbook was. And he's done it to a T. So that FOMO of me watching him, like, I'm not going to dismiss anybody's crazy ideas ever again.
That makes sense. That's an important lesson, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's innovation that I see everywhere now that I didn't see prior to that.
Yeah, and that's I think that's a skill in itself, being able to, and this sounds super harsh, but your ability to kill your babies, right? It's like you have this baby of an idea, and it's yours. And it's like, I have this idea, and then you learn some new information. It's like, damn, was I wrong? You know, it's like having just the humility to be able to go through that is an important process. And I think that, you know, like one of the things that I admire, like, you know, your conversation with David Long, right? It's like that, this 2-year conversation, it's just like such a cool, you know, sparring methodology of finding the, you know, because it's making the industry better, right? This great spar is making this industry better. And I've seen, you know, Patrick do it with Jonathan Dawson. And I've seen like these guys just kind of go at it and it's like, okay, great. It's great to witness this sharpening of this tool, but one has to, you know, when one idea prevails, somebody has to, you know, kill their idea, right? And kill their baby and do that with humility and take that information and be like, okay, I'm going to change my process. And the best operators in the world do that, right? They really have this, I don't know if it's humility is not the right word, but like right sizing their ego to be able to assume new information or accept.
And I think
new
they're
information.
curious.
Yeah.
And you know, like I've changed my stances, and no, I still actually I don't think I know now, and I haven't released this yet. We'll have the full data coming out shortly. But obviously, you know, I work for Cars Commerce, and we have Dealer Inspire websites, which is 6,000 dealer websites.
Yeah.
They're converting over, like, you know, I'm down here in South Florida meeting with Southeast Toyota yesterday, and we were talking a lot about SmartPath. And should you have multiple CTAs, multiple trade widgets, what does that do? What's the client journey look like as they bounce from one to the other? But here's one of the stats that we found is we're looking at some of the biggest dealership websites in the country. If they're only providing a range, and I'm not trying to, I'm saying you should start with a range actually, because that's what gets them to go into the funnel, and you actually get more people to enter the funnel. But if you don't provide a exact value at the end of the journey as an option, not to say that every customer is going to want to do it. If you don't, it's over 80% bounce rate.
Jeez.
Of form completion.
Wow. Yeah, that data is going to tell you what that looks like. I mean, is there, you know, so we talked about Temple Grandin a long time ago, right? You know, Temple Grandin, for those that don't know, was a woman that is autistic, that is into, I think, don't quote me on this, but animal husbandry, agriculture type situation. And this analogy is just so harsh, but she designed systems to take cattle into the slaughterhouse. And what she did was designed a way that the animal couldn't see the horror that they were about to experience, but drastically reduced the anxiety of the animal and, you know, animals getting injured and doing the process. And I'm like, we have to design all systems to make sure that engagement is as right-sized as possible, right? And really understand what that engagement is and understand the mapping of it. Because once we do that, we can do exactly what you're talking about. It's like, why is this step in the process right here losing 80% of its effective rate? And then what is an acceptable
and not trying to
effective
defend
rate?
Why what you're doing is okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see a lot of people doing is, well, let me tell you why that's different with my XYZ situation or my XYZ franchise in this XYZ market. And I now go all over the country, and I know that it's agnostic. Now, there's certain markets where trucks will sell better, and, you know, four-wheel drives and some geo stuff, but the things that are consistent. And, you know, I was just talking about this yesterday, and they said, what are some of the interesting things that you see? Well, down here where we're at in South Florida, Honda doesn't outsell Toyota.
No,
It's not even, right?
It's not even,
But up in the Northeast, it's not like that.
Yeah.
You know, Honda's, and people think that it's weird when Toyota outsells Honda up there.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating for me as I go around the country in these different pockets of how it is geographically, where it's just, you know, the way it is, right? And it's really because of the dealers that have been there for so long that have built this infrastructure. But the consistency, no matter which one has leadership, is people, process, pay plans, and accountability.
Yeah.
And those ingredients in any successful franchise, you know, you go up to Tampa to Hyundai of Newport Richey, the number one, you know, 600 to 700 new cars a month. They have those pieces in place. And every single store that I visit like that, oh, okay, I see why they're successful.
Yeah.
And then they have a process. And I don't agree with all of them.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I will say is that they all, and this is one part where I do agree with David Long. It doesn't so much matter what the process is, as long as you relentlessly execute it. That's more important.
Yeah, that absolutely. I mean, that's moneyballing your dealership, right? It's like if you're hitting singles and doubles all day, and you build your infrastructure around hitting singles and doubles, not the home runs. And I have a gut feeling about this guy or this gal, right? It's just it doesn't seem like the right way to manage an organization. And it's like, how can you maximize your effective rate over a long period of time? And that's, kind of, so for the audience, you and I are on a call basically every morning, Monday through Saturday, talking about the car business, right? On Clubhouse, it's called All Things Car Biz. And, we're kind of everybody sharpening their knives, right, before going into work. And we have this conversation on a regular basis. It's like, is it the chicken or the egg? And is it processes? Is it people? Is it the thing? Is it all the above? It's just it's an interesting way of looking at it. What insights have you seen? I mean, besides knowing that people, processes are the main driver of effective operations across the country, what's the one it factor that you see across all the board, the one thing that they all have in common?
I would say the one thing that they all have in common is it's never enough, and when you try to tell them they're doing a good job, they're sensitive to, no, we're not. We're missing this and this and this. Whereas the ones that are in the middle of the pack will tell you how great this is or great that is, and the top performers won't let you compliment them or compliment their managers in front of them, or you can tell they're very awkward receiving a compliment or somebody telling them that they're doing a good job, and they really, I think they're all proud of their teams, all of them, but they're not proud of how much more opportunity there is that they haven't yet accomplished. And the difference between those stores and, let's say, everybody else, and this has been like a PhD for me working at Cars Commerce, being able to go around, and walk into all these top performing stores and just see how the sausage is made. And as I go in there, the ones that are not, let's say, the elite, that are in the middle of the pack, do a good job. Those, I would classify it like this. They get lucky every once in a while. It's like playing blackjack. And every once in a while, they're getting a bad run. Maybe I should stop keeping all these age cars and I should start doing something else or change my strategy. And then all of a sudden they sell one and they make $4,000. And
now that confirmation bias is killer, yeah.
Right. See, I told you.
Yeah.
And they're not playing the odds like you're talking about with Moneyball, the singles and the doubles. They're like, I told you I could hit it out of the park.
Yep.
And I'm not changing my process now. It worked. Yeah. And that's the deception, in their brains of the ones that don't get to elite.
Yeah. There was there's a famous story about Tommy Gibbs talking to a general manager who's like, the 7 Series BMW was sitting on a lot at 45 days and doing this stuff. And he's like, why haven't you sent it to the cars to the auction? It's like, well, the market and blah, blah, blah stuff. And, he kind of goes all through all the reasons.
Can't replace it for that.
He can't replace it. So again, there's feeling this market. I know this all this stuff. And then he's like, well, it boils down to it's not the right color. It's like, well, was it the right color when you bought it? So, that gut feeling is that just confirmation bias. And I think that, one thing that I see that super operators all have in common is that they've gone through trials and tribulations, which is a really interesting thing, man. One X factor is like trials and tribulations, but I think the trials and tribulations give you an ability to work on yourself that not a lot of people have.
I've gone on that journey with Tommy.
Really?
And he ran me through the ringer.
Wow.
Deservedly so. Dale Pollock was there right when Viato was just coming on. Velocity had just been released. And we brought Tommy in as a consultant with Dale. And I had this Mercedes store in Columbus, Ohio, where Daniel Gover worked.
Yep.
We only had like 35 or 40 spaces. And I had all these beautiful Porsches and Range Rovers and just the best inventory, right? What I thought. And Dale's like, he's, for everybody listening that doesn't know this, he's blind, right? So he goes, yeah, you got all the wrong inventory out there. I'm like, how would you know? You can't see it. And he goes, it helps me that I can't see it because you're emotionally attached to it. Oh. And he goes, pull up stock wave and search by market day supply. And I hadn't really heard that term yet, at that point. This is like in 06, 07. And he goes, okay, so what, sorted by lowest day supply, and you're just going to start sourcing those. And I'm like, oh, Pontiac Aztec? Yeah, buy it. I'm God. Like, if you saw this, I know you can't see them, but if you saw this, you wouldn't buy it. And he goes, and Steve Germain's like, hit the button. And it was one after another. It was Plymouth Voyager. It was a Dodge Stealth. It was all these either models. It was right before the recession. but it was models that were going extinct, Plymouth Horizon, all this
G8s.
Yeah, just yes, all that.
Yeah.
And there was no supply out there because nobody was buying them, but there was actually a demand for them. So we get this truckload of, misfit toys, and they all sold in 2 weeks. So
Jeez.
then we were on a conference call or whatever, and he goes, "Okay, well, do the same thing and just buy them again." And I'm like, "Well, even on broken clocks, right twice a day, but I don't want to take this chance again." Did it? And guess what was still there? My Rovers, Porsches. All the exotic stuff that was good looking, but the math didn't line up. So that was a real wake-up call to me.
So does that start that journey on data, or had that data journey been there before?
So David Long's mentor, his coach, John Melashenko, he took me over to open up the Open Point Lexus store. We opened it up 3 days before September 11th, so it was great timing.
Oh, jeez.
Like I opened up that Mercedes store right before the Great Recession, the same month.
Golly, man.
So you get to be really innovative.
Hard times give you a lot of the mother of innovation, right?
That's right. But it's necessity. But John didn't, he came from Toyota Motor North America, national sales manager. He didn't come from retail up, which I thought was a real weird thing at the time. But he's the one that opened up my eyes to data and looking at it through that lens because it was foreign to me up until that point.
Do you think that comes from that continuous improvement kind of model? Is like getting that feedback, looking at data, doing that feedback loop, is that Kaizen culture that Toyota has?
Yes, and we went deep into that in terms of parking and all these, inefficiencies or whatever. And I went through the Lexus Benchmarks for Excellence program, which is instilled a lot of that in me. That's like the most intense one that they have. That goes deep. Sewell, Park Place, JM Lexus, the best of the best are in that thing, and they all learn from each other and share all the benchmarks. But I think that John had to manage by data because he'd never sold cars, so he didn't know what he didn't know.
Wow.
So he had to figure out, it's like somebody playing a game, but they're playing it in a different way, but they're still winning.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen it played that way. It's more like what the publics do. And it was very fascinating where he would show me how to, through the metrics, I would look at it from tribal knowledge and be able to see what are they not doing, or what's the salesperson not TOing, or, you sense it like almost like a clutch in a manual transmission. You can't describe it, but you know it, that they're about to lose the deal, or the body language intuitively. But he managed it at scale through data. And he would point out things that I didn't see with the data, and then really like laying those two over top of each other, it created like a superpower. Wow.
Yeah, that when I first got into the car business, I didn't believe anybody. Like, it was a dealer in Miami. Like, why is the showroom empty? It's like, it's raining. Nobody buys cars when it's raining. He's like, why is the showroom empty? It's sunny. Everybody's at the beach. And it's like, dude, this is bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, you're lying to me. And I get it. Like, I understand. And
right, if you wanted a weather report,
exactly. If I wanted a weather, exactly. So I just, I was like, we spent $80,000, $90,000. This is 10 years, 11, 12 years ago. Like, spend $90,000 on mailers. And it's like, don't spend any, kill all of it. Sold the same amount of cars. Sold 35 cars. Same thing. Okay, those aren't working, obviously. So it's like, I think with momentum and experience, there's things that are really good that happen that you can have, a finance manager that can do, 7 pound deals in the back end that you're like, man, this guy's a magician in some capacity. But that same magic for management by running by gut isn't a skill set or a tool set that you need to be able to look at things coldly through data and start talking about a system rather than a gut feeling.
And even layering in people in that, we started using predictive analytics and predictive learning index with like agility. So not just we use PI, predictive index, but on every person. And I was part of like a big, massive study of that at AutoNation as to what does a 20-car person look like. It's like these three profiles. What's a top? Nice. What's a top performer F&I person? What's a middle performer? What's a bottom? What's a poor overall? 85% plus of the time, which profiles don't do well, and then here's why they don't do well. Unless, with these profiles, you surround them with a billing clerk to be able to do their paperwork. But you could connect the dots on the people, or you would create a team, which is what, we did at a lot of the stores that I worked at, where you'd find one manager that's very skilled at accountability, guarding the process, and then you have another person that's more relationship driven, better at connecting with others, meeting that need, and then lining up. You don't put a highly altruistic person on a manager's team that's devoid of emotion.
Yeah. And it's like a formula for conflict, or and that's really that Moneyball aspect of like looking at it. It's like, how do you add the right ingredients to be able to do this and do this successfully, and do this successfully every single time?
And then one other element that has to happen, which is how, even though we had that paperless process down, it really took 6 months before it took off. And it's because I did the equivalent of trading Pena, to the Tigers.
Okay.
And Jared Kilway and I took our CDK printers out, and I drove over them with my FJ Cruiser, and just took a video of it and shared it with everybody.
That's
and
great.
said, hey, just so you know, we went paperless.
Yeah, exactly. There's no turning back. Printing the boats.
Form feeds.
Those Oki printers. Yeah.
That's right.
So, kind of talking about the new thing about this journey mapping. Talking to a dealer, and they were like, hey, man, we made some changes on the phone system, and they were going into this black hole infinite loop of, despair, and we're tracking $300,000 more this month than we were last month. I mean, that big of a swing because of a change on a phone system going to the wrong place.
I had 8 deadlines at a Chevrolet store I took over in Clearwater once. I did it first week because I've been to that party before, but yeah, I don't know how long that had been going on, but if it's been going on for 6 months, a year, it's nauseating.
Yeah, it had been gone. Thankfully, it had gone on for like 45 days before they found it. And, there's lulls that are happening in the car business, right? It had just happened in January, February, and then they found it, and they're like, "What? We're tracking a lot." So it was like, are we back to 2019 numbers in 2024? Is like that whole COVID, everything that's happening, right? So it's marred by a lot of stuff, and also confirmation bias. Is like, the party's going to stop. Did it stop now? Did it stop because of the phone system? Did it stop because it's the market? How much of it is that?
Are they resulting and finding a result and then justifying it in reverse to get to that result?
Yeah, exactly. Most cases, people, rather than just accepting something for it is what it is and let's fix it, it's like, oh, it wasn't me. You know what I mean? So everybody's kind of guarding their territory and covering their asses to be able to make sure that they're not the one that was like, hey.
Epidemic.
Yeah.
In every business.
Yeah. And so, I was kind of thinking about, and this is that customer mapping idea, right? Is that how do you get, and the kind of thing that we're talking about this morning is like, how do you get fresh eyes on a problem? Systematically, right? Because if you're in the dealership, you can't really get fresh eyes, and you don't want to let anybody know where your holes are. It's like, so how as a body, right? Do you audit those trails and have a technologist that understands the ecosystem of doing that, and say, okay, somebody on the other side, call into the phone. Did you answer? Okay, go to go everywhere and validate these systems every 6 months to make sure that the things that you're designing are actually getting translated and implemented in the right way, and you understand your data flow and your data map or ingress, egress of your systems, and really not find those black holes. Because you could have had that same loop during COVID, and you're like, we're doing great, and you put $2 million, you lost $2 million of business because there was a black hole of that for a year.
And everything's about retention right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the biggest hot button with every OEM. What's your loyalty index? What's your retention percentage? But I think it's hard to sharpen the blade when you're in the middle of sawing.
Yes,
and there has to be. If you don't get the people thing right, like we were talking about earlier, and you don't have role clarity, who's responsible for this, to be able to be clear as to who can be freed up to figure out those problems strategically. Because if everybody's just reacting and doing the same things and there's no role clarity, so we're all responsible if we win or we lose. And you can't say to each person, did you win the day? And at the end of the day, like service drive acquisition is a great example. We would always sit there and say, yeah, what's our process? Well, we've got Jimmy that goes back there, a couple days a week and is going to work the drive. But we didn't measure it. We didn't have lead measures, scoreboard, lag measures, no accountability. So it just had to be a progression that ended up, looking like at the end of the day, went from one person to 12 people, and they were responsible, and they knew every single day that they had to turn it in to the acquisition sales manager. This is how many appraisals I did. This is how many people I contacted. This is how many appointments I have for tomorrow. Because there's failure points within CRMs that for acquiring vehicles that there's not, they all don't have ideal workflows unless you get a separate like CRM for that. So that we need to hold these ROs. These are the cars we acquired. We need to hold these ROs open so we can close out in the customer's name to make sure we get credit for retention. Because that work and make sure that the service advisor gets paid on it. But that cadence of accountability and knowing if they missed the number, they could see it on a scoreboard. So they couldn't just say, well, if service acquisition was doing their job, we would have hit the number.
Yeah.
Right. Like because then you have to have lateral accountability that acquisition manager can see, okay, so on internet, what was our closing percentage? Did we close at 15%? Did we get enough contact made? Did we get enough appointments set? Shown? Who's responsible for those things? And when you have that level of clarity and everybody knows that they don't have to do somebody else's job because they're going to do theirs and you just have to do yours, that's how you get people freed up to be able to map all that stuff out. And if you go through the mapping, I would start it like this. Use this as a reference point in a car dealership. And you can have, obviously you want to listen to phone calls, and I always did, more so because I wanted to hear stuff like that. Or getting routed to the wrong hunt group, or somebody picked up their phone, unplugged it, and walked over to a different part of the dealership, and now they're on a service hunt group. But they're getting the inbound service calls and keep hitting do not disturb. I don't know why this thing keeps ringing. Or just insanity, the nails on a chalkboard, stuff like that to me. But if you an average sales process, when you come into the showroom, customer comes in, meet and greet, sit down, do a needs analysis, figure out what they're trying to, get selection, appraise their car, go take a demo drive, come back. Hopefully by then you've had an early manager intro. That's all scripted out. Should be choreography. Then you're going to present the first pencil. And then everything else happens after that. The next question is, what does that look like online? How far can the customer get?
Yeah.
Can they get a menu? Can they upload their documents? Can they upload the drive securely? Which is a huge issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Yeah.
Can they work payments? Can they modify it like on a Tesla website or in a smart path environment? Can they appraise their car? And if they want more than a range, so you don't have the 80% bounce rate, can they keep going and get an exact value like they can on Carvana or CarMax, which is where they bounce to according to the pixels we're looking at.
Oh.
So they get an exact value, just not from that dealer.
Oh, okay.
He's like, okay, no big deal. Now I'm gonna find out what it's really worth. And that's why CarMax acquired 250,000 cars last quarter from consumers.
Wow.
So, credit app, is it easily integrated? Is it iframed in? One other thing is, if I ran into this problem with credit apps. Salespeople don't want to use it. It's another step. It's redundant. Well, obviously, I didn't want redundant. I want to remove roadblocks so that the path of least resistance is the way I want it done, and the way the customer wants it done.
Yeah, exactly.
So we would fill that out, but then they had to print it, and then they had to load it all back into the CRM.
Jeez.
Because it wasn't mapped in the backside, which took me days in the back of Route 1 and Dealer Track to map all this equals this equals this.
Yep.
And it's different in Dealer Track and Route 1 than it is in the desking tool. It's different in the desking tool than it is in the hard codes of the DMS.
And God forbid they call it something different.
Correct. So you have to have a Rosetta Stone, like a Rubik's Cube. If this equals this, like a 6-digit combination.
Yeah, exactly.
This equals this, now it's got the perfect.
Yeah.
But if you don't make it that easy, and I know that not everybody's equipped to do that, but you need to find somebody who is, to be able to map that all the way through. When you do that, you don't have to ask your salespeople to follow the process. They'll do it because it's easier.
Of course. Yeah, that's going back to Temple Grandin, right? It's like there's no other way, because that is like you have designed the road to a way of removing those excuses, removing those hurdles, removing that barrier, not seeing the slaughterhouse in front of it, and it's the path of least resistance. You make your path the path of least resistance.
And empower them to pull payoffs through Route 1.
Yeah.
So they don't have to wait on a call for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And just all those little, empower them to appraise cars. And I know that's a really controversial thing. It'll be very commonplace in the next year or so.
Yeah.
AI keeps on coming in. I think that's something else. process mapping is not going to be a nice to have. It's going to be a requirement because you have to train these AI tools.
Of course.
And everybody's got some AI something, but the only ones I see winning, a lot of people don't know what to do with them. I think there's going to be like an e-com BDC manager.
Yeah.
There's going to be an AI manager either to marketing or to
That
operations.
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you have to train it the way your store wants to do business.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I recently created you know what a GPT is, right?
Yep.
Like, so ChatGPT came up with a new thing called workspaces. And the workspaces, you can create your own workspaces. So you could put like Kramer GPT, and then you could teach it all the things that you know, and you can configure it in a way that it's like, this is the way Brian Kramer does things. And then you can train it to be able to do that. And it's stupidly easy. It's very easy. And I did one for, you're familiar with Chris Voss, right?
Yeah.
Never Split the Difference? I'm a ridiculous fan of his. I read his book, I think 7 times in a row. And so I have the principles of his, negotiation tactics seared into my brain. And I taught a GPT how to be a BDC negotiator, like a BDC assistant, where you say, use all the techniques from Never Split the Difference.
How am I supposed to do that?
Yeah, exactly. How am I supposed to do that? No ended questions, right? Tactical empathy, and literally, you ask it a question, like literally a lead comes in. It's like, I want a vehicle for my family. And you put in, you don't get yes, no, ever. You get a full tactical empathy engagement with a customer that's going to build rapport as fast as possible, build trust, and have them come into the dealership, right? Already prepped to have this relationship. And I'm like, this has to be in everything. You have to teach people how to be better people so they can engage in this capacity, right?
And you have to give them clarity. Now, the other thing, too, is that you get an unbiased, objective analysis as to whether it works or it doesn't work, because then you can measure the result of it, and you don't have somebody saying, well, my customers are a little bit different. The GPT doesn't say that. It doesn't say, here in South Florida, it's a little bit different than it is up in Seattle, John.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't get all that feedback. You just, okay, that worked. I can change it or not change it, but you don't have the biases and the heuristics that are attached to most scenarios.
And every time it's going to do the same thing. So you know if it works or it doesn't. Because the thing, there's, I've talked about this a couple times, but there's something called the curse of knowledge. It's like when I say something to you, Brian, there's a 30% transmittal of information, right? Like I'm transmitting only 30% of the information because I have my assumptions, I have my life experiences, I have all the stuff that I've done, and you have yours. So there's a gap between how much I assume you know and how much I'm actually transmitting. That's like a 40% gap between that. And imagine teaching that in processes. You have to go so far into the process, so deep into the training to be able to make sure somebody does it repeatedly over time and that process sticks.
If everybody listening to this doesn't take anything else away, I would tell them that that's a trained muscle that I've had to develop over decades.
Yeah.
And I fight it every single day. I fight it on all these clubhouse calls.
Yeah.
Because I know what I think, but I still have to remain objective because David Long might have a point. Now, I'm still waiting for him to quantify it, but and when I walk into stores, I look at Brian Benstock's process. I wouldn't do it that way, but it works amazingly well for him. Who am I to question it?
Yeah.
Because everybody is completely bought into that, and you're not going to convince any of them of any other way from the top all the way down, and they believe that's the only way and that's the best way, and that's the most important thing, I think, is the buy-in.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we're talking kung fu versus karate, versus jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like if you're mastering your thing, you're going to beat up 90%, 95% of the population, right? If you're like you're a master at your thing, whether you do kung fu, jujitsu, or karate, you're going to be good at self-defense, right? Like these arguments are so interesting because we're talking about like micro percentages of differences between, maybe Brian Benstock does things completely different than Patrick, but they're both winning. So who gives a shit,
But the one thing they're consistent about is they're both about the customer.
Exactly.
And they work that experience backwards.
Yep.
And not everybody does that. There's a lot of, like in my world, here's the decision tree. It's customers first.
Yep.
Then we had this, I went over during every onboarding to let everybody know what's more important, right? So first it's customers, then it's dealership associates. Everybody's, no, Richard Branson says if you take care of your employees, no. If there's a problem that comes up and it's between your time and their time, it's the customer. After the dealership associates, then it's our dealership partners, or OEM. Yep. In our case, it was World Omni, it's Southeast Toyota, JM&A. After that, it was all the other partners, which would be, like in my case, cars.com.
Yeah.
And a lot of people take offense to that. Then it would be the wheel repair team, the bumper repair, and then after that, the community, and so on. But when I would lay that out and I would tell it to vendors, and a lot of people would get ruffled, feathers, but I needed to make it clear that if a customer was in the used car, office and they're waiting to get numbers from the used car manager, and the person that was doing the bumpers came in and wants to, to get approvals and talk about glass chips and all that other stuff, they needed to understand that the customer is the priority. Yeah. And if a dealership associate came in, they wanted to, request PTO, and that sales manager is working a deal for the customer, it needed to be easy, which it always was, and had to be constantly reminded. That's why it was posted everywhere. Yeah. So that we could reference it. Hey, why did you, and then it comes back to the Disney stuff: safety, courtesy, show, efficiency. If you're walking across the showroom and you've got a customer waiting on you, and you're trying to be efficient to be able to, get numbers and go email it to somebody, and you don't acknowledge the customer, you just violated that because you're trying to be more efficient than you are courteous.
Oh, wow.
So the last couple of years I worked in retail. That's probably what I spent. Those two things, probably 80, and plus the process map, and that was probably 90% of my time.
Do you think that the success doesn't necessarily, that most of the largest percentage of success comes from just setting that north of things, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a Patrick's store, there's levels. And it's very clear at every position, what do I need to do to get to the next level? What does that look like? And there's visualization right on the wall.
Yeah.
And they talk about it. But that North Star should permeate and percolate through everything that you do. Like in our case, it was simple, fast, and easy. And we hung our hat on that. But then it became more than just our advertising tagline. It became our battle cry. So I had a lot of people that would come in, and this is an interesting thing probably for a lot of vendors. I had a lot of vendors that would come in and they'd say, hey, I can do bi-monthly payments, or I can do something else that was going to add some level of complexity. And I had to sit there and say, okay, I could make an extra $300 a car. And there's always that opportunity, right? Or $500 a car. And everybody's like, well, if you do this and you just get 30%, and the next thing you know, you're talking $1 million a year or more. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that we said no to a lot of those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I tell them, I said, we're simple, fast, and easy. I'm doing everything I can to remove one little click. When they want to appraise the car, how do they not have to put in their first, last name, and email address? How do I already know them if they're on my website? How do I, if they enter my digital retail tool and they put in their cell phone number, I should already know all their information. They shouldn't have to type it in all these redundant times. Yeah. And if they put it in the credit app, it should go throughout into the CRM and populate everywhere else. We shouldn't keep asking them. And then when they come in for service, their first service, we shouldn't act like they're a complete stranger when they bought 6 cars. And we have to, hey, can you give me your, okay, what's your current address? Well, it's the same as before. Can you just give it to me again? Because they're not rolling their appointments. They're just starting a new DMS lead, and there's 27 different clients that haven't been merged that are all being followed up with in different ways, and the data hasn't been cleansed. And everything that goes, it's not just one thing. It's all those little things that make it simple, fast, and easy. And in order to fix those things, you have to say no to some good ideas so you can just focus on a few great ideas.
Yeah. And that's what really talks about operational saturation. It's like there's a million good ideas out there. You could do things one way, you could do things another, but having that core battle cry, or that core, that spirit to core, right? That simple, fast, and easy. You say, is it simple, fast, and easy? No, we're not doing it. And it's like your baseline operating system gets loaded with, does it meet this requirement? No. And then you can just be like, hey, it doesn't meet the requirement, man. And we all agree on this thing. So if it does that, we do it. If it doesn't,
figure out a way to make it simple, fast, and easy. If not, table it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is going to eliminate 20% of your process. Like, oh, well, it's simple, fast, and easy, right? So that's like, man, that's such a good point. So this is going to be maybe a controversial question.
Good.
So I think that the incentives are set up incorrectly. Pay incentives are set up incorrectly.
The salespeople compensation, or the service?
I think in general. Because if you're 10-10, you're not incentivized in creating long-term winning strategies, it seems like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, simple pay plans create I think, unaligned incentives. It's like if your incentive is to save as much money, not train your staff, create long-term processes for the long-term sustainability of the organization, and every month the chalkboard gets erased and you're starting from zero, it's a almost cannibalistic way of running an organization.
And I'm numb to it because I don't know another way of life. Like now I get paid the same, every month, regardless of how much I travel, how much, if I work, twice as many hours, it's a flat amount, right?
Yeah.
I guess like most people and normal people.
Yeah.
And I've only been in that survival mode for the majority of my life, and I actually personally prefer it, but I have to be objective because it's not the most effective. Patrick Abad's a great example.
Yeah.
And he has a tiered flat system, and it worked out for him during COVID because his percentage of gross wasn't like everybody else's, and he didn't have to pay out these gigantic commissions. But his people also didn't get used to making an unrealistic amount of money. Yeah. And now he's not dealing with all these people saying, I don't know how to, my cost of living changed and I've got all these bills. And his model was elastic. And now everybody wants to work for him because he's paying more than these minimum commissions that are going out. And he was able to be very resilient through all that and painted. And I give him a lot of credit. At Germain, and they still do today, we hammered, do not buy too much house, do not buy too much car, make sure you're investing it.
Yeah.
We were really hardcore about, make sure you're maxing out your 401k for everybody that was making all this money. But Patrick's leadership is phenomenal in terms of him painting the vision. Here's why we do this, and here's why it's going to pay off for you in the end, and this is why this is a better long-term strategy. And if you do this, you can set your own schedule, and there's more to it than just the actual pay. He paints the vision of the intangibles that don't necessarily cost him money, but if you hit a certain performance level, you just set your own schedule. Yeah. And tell them at the beginning of the month, which we had some similar at Germain. You need to submit it. It needs to be this many Saturdays, and you got to work this many days. But just submit to us when you're going to be here, so we can give it to the receptionist, so that she knows. You can't just come and go as you please, but so at least we can keep track of when you're here, when you're not here, at least to tell your customers.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good way of looking at it. But like I just think that out of the momentum of the industry is so powerful that you can have a lot of loss and a lot of noise and still be effective, right? I can't argue with a guy that's jetting around the country and be like, look, I mean, it's worked for me. You know what I mean? It's like,
it's my biggest struggle right now.
Yeah, I bet. It's like to really look at those people that want to go from 94% effective rate to 97%. That those like horsepower, right? The higher you go in horsepower, the harder it is to get to a higher speed, right? So like how do you paint that picture for and dealers are in different phases of their I guess journey, right? Their journey in this business, right? There's people that are like, I'm 34 and I'm taking over this dealership and I'm going to be a dealer principal and I became a managing partner and that's one story. And then somebody's at the end of their career is like, listen, man, I want the thing humming. Don't mess with it. And
or
how do you deal with that?
34-year-old salesperson that is making a couple $100,000 a year. They've mastered their craft. They don't want to have all that accountability pressure, which there's a lot of, and they don't thrive on it. They hate it. And there's many cases like that, but they also feel like they have this obligation that, man, this person's in F&I, maybe I should be in F&I. And not everybody's built for that. And the ones, especially the ones that have a family, being in sales and selling 20 to 25 cars a month is in my mind, the best gig in a dealership. Wow. You get left alone. Nobody just comes in and just randomly, gets blamed for not hitting their number that's selling 20 plus cars a month. Yeah. And they require the least amount of advertising. Typically, on average, they're higher maintenance. But I'd rather have higher maintenance people, not unethical, immoral people. But yeah, they're going to require more, and they need more empowerment and more enablement and more, wider swim lanes, I guess. Yeah. Bumpers on the bumper bowling thing. But I think that the more you enable those people and quit holding them back, what I see the worst thing in the world is, and I've experienced it, when they're managing people like that because of the bottom 20% that they won't hold accountable. And then they get boxed in with, they have to wait to get their car appraised. They have to wait to get a payoff. Yeah. And they wait, and they can't be productive. And that's when they start thinking about leaving. In terms of the percentage versus a flat, I do think it's flawed, but I've gone round and round on this. It just wasn't the hill that I wanted to die on. I've seen a lot of people that are very successful doing it the way Patrick's doing it.
Yeah.
Brian Benstock at his Acura store is taking deals single point of contact from start to finish, from greet to F&I.
Soup to nuts, yeah.
And when you don't, in that model, and they're actually more profitable now.
I would imagine.
In F&I. Well, I didn't think so, and he was okay going backwards just because there's a comp savings. But what he's been able to do at that Acura store is he's able to pay his salespeople more, but still pay out less because and they are paying on a if you sell a service contract like CarMax, this much, but they still have an opportunity to make a lot of money, but just in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the head side is probably a lot lower because there's not the bloat of having those those managers in F&I, taking all those percentages. That makes a lot of sense. So what are you excited about the car business? Like I know there's a big challenge / opportunity with used cars coming in. People that got in tough situations during COVID. What's something exciting about the car business that you're looking forward to in the next 12 months?
Well, I see kind of like the resurgence of 2005 to 2009 with BDCs.
Okay.
When everybody would get so frustrated, like, I know we need to follow up, and these CRMs just came out, and we need to use a CRM instead of the 355 index cards that I used to use.
Yeah.
And that's not the best system, but we don't know. The salespeople can't make phone. Me personally, I think you just hold salespeople accountable and have them do a cradle to grave and have a service BDC, but that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Because then you can actually pay the salespeople more because you have a bigger pool to work from. But the same thing that happened in the mid to late 2000s is happening now with acquisitions. So there's two different schools of thought or departments, I guess, developing that I'm seeing, where they're actually putting resources. The most successful stores, and I'm working with a lot of them, that are acquiring 100, 150 plus, and I'm talking a lot of them, cars a month off the service drive. But also a lot of stores that are, based on their RO count, another incremental 25 or 35 cars a month, which in a store that writes less than 1,000 ROs a month is a major difference. You're not paying out $1,000 in auction fees, transport, and then post-sale inspections are $1,500 or $500. So you're at $1,500 to $2,000 in fees now that you're saving on a car that's got a low market day supply versus an auction car that's a high market day supply. Yeah. So there's so many benefits. Already it's right there. You're scanning it hopefully with an OBD thing. But I think that the dealerships that I see that are the most successful are finally putting a manager on that. Do you really need 3 managers behind the sales tower? No, you need 1.
Yeah.
And if everybody comes up with their stuff all ready to go, you don't banter back and forth and, wear them out because they didn't spend 10 minutes getting a payoff because you wouldn't give them access to Route 1 and all the other redundancies, and just make it clear and say, okay, this is how many cars you need to acquire, and this is all you're going to do. And I'm going to pay you $300 or $400 and not try to just pay them $75 a car because that's what we did back in the 2000s. Yeah. And we haven't changed the pay plan since. Charge that to the stock number. Think outside the box and start getting creative. You would think the last people to do it would be the big publics, but they're the ones that I'm working with that are, again, very creative. And most of their pay plans are carved and etched in granite, but they're thinking outside the box and doing things like this. They're doing tiered acquisition program. Some of them are counting acquisitions as units towards their pay plan.
Oh, wow.
And so it's not just how many cars do you sell, how many cars do you sell, plus how many cars do you acquire. That's what your unit bonus is based on.
That makes sense. Yeah, you incentivize the steps, not necessarily the outcome.
Correct. Yeah. And really, if you want to acquire cars, you should pay people, more than what a Mini is to acquire cars. Yeah. Because what happens is, in most dealerships at first that we're working with, I'll look at the pay plan, and they're getting paid more to sell than they are to acquire. So what do? As soon as they greet the customer, hey, what if I paid you more than your car's worth? Would you consider selling it to me? I don't know. How much would you give me for it? I don't know. What do you want to replace it with? That's the wrong thing to say. Yeah. Because their pay plan's driving that behavior. Yeah. And that's the root cause of it. But either a buy center, vehicle buying center, or service drive, or having the combination of the two, like Beaver does, that's what the most successful stores are doing, and that's what's eliminating their need to, rely on auctions. But it makes them so much healthier. There's a symbiotic relationship between the service department, and that acquisition team. Yeah, and the acquisition team, can work regular hours. You don't have to work past 5 o'clock if you're meeting the minimum requirements. You can actually take Sundays off. You don't have to be there. And you can hire a different type of person, a different caliber of person, and it really opens up the labor pool.
That's really smart. Yeah. That's super smart. So what do you think of, I've always had this idea is like, if you have the car on the lift, you might as well do an appraisal on it. You know what I mean? Just make it part of the technician can do an appraisal. Look at the vehicle, take pictures of everything, do the thing, get the number, put it all in, and you appraise the vehicle right there. You put it in your system, and then you have the latest appraisal of that vehicle is maybe 2 weeks old, or 3 weeks old, or a month old, or 6 months old, or whatever that looks like since the last time it was in service.
So we've got a lot of Peter Bullware Toyota up in Tallahassee does that, and they get a tremendous amount of incremental business, sometimes 30 a month off of, because they appraise 90% of their cars in the way that you just described. Not they got the valets doing it, which is what
makes sense.
Toyota Hollywood around the corner is going to be doing here momentarily.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I was here is to talk to them, talking to Southeast Toyota. We're building an integration right now, and this is something that's very exciting. And then what AI is going to also allow this to unlock. I won't get too deep in the weeds on this, but Hunter alignment racks and UVI inspection systems
makes sense.
Already, when it goes through, if you think about what like on our scorecard, where are dealers struggling, it's to get their, when they start having 50, 60, 70, these big stores, salespeople appraising cars, how do you get past 60% tread depth percentage? Because they're going so fast. How do you get past 80% OBD scans? Yeah. And 80% photos. Well, if you go through a Hunter alignment rack or you go through UVI, you've got 100% photos now. Yep. 100% tread depth. Yep. With cupped or uneven tread wear. You've got photos. You just need to do an OBD and mileage because it's doing everything else. Actually, it's got the photos.
You're automating everything. And then you put that into data analytics and you do, 2 million a year, and you're really starting to tighten up your data set to say, hey, this is exactly what this is. And you can even say, you could probably figure out, do some predictive analytics and say, this is an aggressive driver. This is, this person babies the car.
And then companies are already doing that.
Yeah.
Without the consumers knowing it in many cases.
Of course, yeah. And you take that data from the, the OBD2 readers, like the safe driving, crap that they're trying to do. You can really have a really good perspective of what the dealer is. And then you combine online behavior, purchasing power of what, you're predicting the future at this point.
Yeah.
You're predicting the future.
Well, over-the-air updates are a thing. It's just a matter of unlocking, getting the consumer to be able to opt into to doing it. We're working with a few OEMs right now in the mapping to figure that out, not just to do it in the service drive, but remotely at home. If we can diagnose their whole vehicle with DTC codes, we can also pull down their mileage because that's a basically an opt code.
Nothing. Yeah.
It's in there, and eventually we'll be able to pull subscription products and that's all in the connected car, IoT, Internet of Things data. So the goal by the end of this year is to figure out how to be able to pull mileage and DTC so we don't even have to plug it in eventually. Wow. And as soon as they go through that UVI, which that dealership around the corner does 10,000 a month.
UVIs?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
every single vehicle that goes through UVI.
Yeah, there's only one way in.
That's powerful,
man. They got 4 of those units.
That's powerful.
That are huge. Yeah, so as they've got that type of volume, now you think about what can AI unlock, and their goal is to sell 300 or 400 cars a month out of that by acquiring a little bit more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That to me is the future between that type of service drive integration combined with like on cars.com right now we've got My Garage, which some other CarMax, Carvana have these things where you can go in. The difference with ours is you can pull your payoff and figure out what you owe versus what it's worth. Okay. At will. I think that's the next form of lead gen. Instead of people aggregating all over the place. That's how I've got a Lexus GX 550 on order, and I got to figure out when's the best time to get rid of this Bronco that I'm driving. Yeah. After I handle the diminished value from getting rear-ended, but I don't know what I owe on it. I have an idea what it's worth. Yeah. I don't know, right? So because it's not as easy to get your payoff. So that's what we're unlocking is being able to give dealers that ability on the service drive, like not guesstimated algorithm, like with the real payoff,
Yeah.
pulled down from an API from the lender.
Jeez.
Combined with a guaranteed value off the license plate. So the car drives through. Obviously Hunter or UVI sees the license plate in a millisecond. We're pinging the DMV, getting the VIN. So we already got the VIN. We've got everything but the DTC scan and the mileage before they open the door. That's today.
That's powerful. I mean, that's an uplift. What do you think that's an uplift on a dealership on average?
Well, it depends on, that's a great question, because now it comes down to the execution, bringing it to life.
So let's say execution is at 80%. What do you think an uplift in an organization gross-wise? Is that 10%? Is that 20%?
It'd be 3% plus of how many ROs they write, right? So like at 10,000 ROs, that's 300 cars a month of the most desirable used cars.
Jeez.
Month in, month out. I mean, that slingshots them to another, stratosphere. But for a store that has 1,000 ROs a month, which is probably an average store, 1,000 to 2,000.
Yeah.
At 3%, you're getting an incremental 30 cars a month. So if you take a store like that, it's probably selling 30 to 40 used cars a month. You can pretty much double their business using this.
Wow.
Efficiency. As long as, but the execution piece is a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
Of, are you going to have the process? What are you going to measure the scoreboard? Are you going to hold people accountable? Have those daily grind conversations like they do with internet leads. Hey, did you contact this? All those metrics that 35, 60, 60, with, as long as it's confirmed that everybody drills, they're going to have to do that with service drive acquisition. And there's a lot of dealers, I can think of a dozen right now, that are acquiring 100 cars or more a month by doing that. So it's a mixture. It's actually less technology than it is process and execution. Most people want to just focus on the tech and think that it's going to take care of itself.
Yeah, the weapons don't make the warrior type of situation.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's powerful. So, Brian, how do people get a hold of you? I know you're on Clubhouse every morning in the group, but how, if somebody had a question or wanted to get in contact with you, what would that look like?
They can email me at bkramer, Kramer, @cars.com. Look me up on LinkedIn. It's Brian Kramer. On YouTube, it's same. My handle's Brian Kramer.
Nice.
Twitter, X is
Nice.
Kramer Brian, and Instagram is Kramer Brian.
Nice. Thanks, man. This has been awesome, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate you letting me on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man.